Hello, hello, and welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories here on K-Fred Radio. I'm Janet Monroe. I'm a birth mother, a storyteller, and a listener of stories. I'm also one who believes that every adoption story deserves to be heard. Today, we're welcoming Kim. Kim is an adopted mother, a former foster mom, an author, a podcast host, an advocate for families navigating life's journeys. She currently lives in Ohio with her husband, Kevin, and their two daughters, Eden and Shiloh. Kim's path to motherhood included infertility, adoption, foster care, and learning to trust God's plan through seasons that were often difficult and uncertain. Along the way, she discovered that even our hardest experiences can shape us, strengthen us, and prepare us to help others. She is the author of 2 books, including Nothing Wasted, Struggling Well Through Difficult Seasons. She writes for several well-known publications and ministries and hosts the Book Therapy podcast. Today, Kim shares her story of faith, family, adoption, resilience, and the lessons she's learned through both heartbreak and hope. Now, Kim, welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories.
Thank you, Janet. I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad to see you today. So let's take us back to the beginning. When you were growing up, what did you imagine that your future family life would be like?
My mother had 7 kids, so I never imagined a small, quiet life. I always imagined a big dinner table, bumping elbows and fighting over food and just enjoying the loud atmosphere of having a big loving family. Because that's what I was used to, that's sort of what I envisioned. I didn't know the responsibility that comes with raising 7 kids as the mother. I was just the kid, so I had an innocent view of everything. And as I grew up, I still wanted several kids. And I didn't think that anything was really going to get in the way of that because I felt like my faith was in the right direction. I felt like I had earned my way by my good behavior, and therefore I would earn this great adult life with a husband and kids, doing ministry, and, just living the dream. So it's very obvious that I came into adulthood very naive and expecting things that weren't necessarily going to happen. And, God doesn't owe us anything. Everything we receive is a gift. And on the other side, having been through all of that, I am so grateful for the journey that he's put us on because it has brought me my family. It just wasn't the journey that I expected.
All right, so tell me, how did you meet your husband, Kevin?
So I grew up in Michigan and he grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and we met at college in Tennessee. And we were part of a smaller friend group and we played a lot of sports outside, had a lot in common, sat together in the cafeteria, and just a very close-knit group of friends, I would say, guys and girls. And with time, I really respected him. He was studying to be a professor. He loved the Greek language. And so he could talk about the Bible in a way that I have never heard before. We were walking to a campus event and he talked about the Bible verse that says that women are fine china. And that's how he described it, is, it says like women are the weaker vessels, which I never really understood, but someone explained it to him one day in the Greek language that writer was saying that women are fine china. They are beyond precious and delicate, and it is our job to take care of them and nurture them. And so that opened my eyes to just the depth of how he felt and learned about scripture, and his relationship with God just seemed very interesting to me, but also very real. He was also funny and he didn't say much. And because I talk so much, I was attracted to someone who didn't talk so much. And I just wanted to know more about him. But he was a really good friend. I trusted him, and he told the truth. And so with time, our friendship kind of bloomed into a relationship, and we decided to give it a try. I really, really liked him, and he wasn't so sure about me. He wanted to keep me in the friend status, but I convinced him. And we started spending a lot of time together, just the two of us, and getting to know each other. And I just knew very early on, I was like, you know what, he's just the best friend you could have, and he's just a really good guy. And I just fell hard, so we dated and got married in 2010, and then we moved to Texas right away to pursue his seminary degree. So he went to seminary for New Testament studies, and he was studying to be a professor. But his medical situation, it culminated with him having to drop out of the program, and be on seizure medication for the rest of his life. So there was memory loss. There's a lot of instability as far as something that he could count on his whole life, his mind, and had brought him so far, two valedictorian statuses in high school and college, and several master's degrees. And he couldn't trust his mind anymore. His seizure disorder got in the way, and so we were pretty disappointed with that. And then also, that's around the time when we started realizing that we weren't able to get pregnant on our own.
And then you went to IVF.
We thought about it. We prayed about it, and I knew very close people, um, very close family friends, and I just they had gone through it, and so I knew what I would be getting into. And I didn't feel like that was the path for us. So we sat down and we had to make a decision. And it was very awkward to talk about this with my husband. You know, he was my best friend. He still is. But when you carry the weight of infertility as a woman, you know, your body was made to create life. And when that doesn't happen, it throws your whole world out of balance. You can't trust anything, because the one thing you know that you're supposed to be able to do, there's a brick wall. So I really struggled. I lived in denial for several years, and I couldn't get over the fact that it wasn't happening. I just assumed that it would happen. The doctors really didn't have great answers. I didn't go through too much testing, but I did have to wait to do one test because it cost $1,000 and the insurance didn't cover it, and we did not have the money. So I had to wait a full year to be able to afford to do that test. And so it's like I was always just waiting and hoping for several years. And there just came a point where I didn't want to wait anymore. And IVF, it's a great option for many families. Um, it is complex, as is most things when you're deciding how to grow your family. But ultimately, Kevin and I sat down and decided that we liked the idea of fostering, but I needed permanency. And so we decided to move towards adoption, because that would allow us to really grow our family permanently, rather than pursuing adopting through foster care, or just fostering at the time wouldn't have given me that, like I said, the permanency of having your own family.
What does the adoption process include? How did you get involved with it? And what process did you go through?
Most people choose an agency in America. If they're seeking an infant adoption, they go through an agency. And unfortunately, there are so many couples that are looking to adopt a baby, and it's just hard because there's not a lot of situations where birth mothers are able or willing or in the place to choose adoption. Obviously, we want as many birth mothers as possible to be able to have what they need in order to raise the children that God has given them. Whatever situation they're in, you know, the church should come alongside them and help keep those families together. But there are situations where it is wise for the child to be adopted. And that's a hard truth that I've wrestled with over the years. And we don't have to get into it because it's so nuanced and it's so complex. But I know you, as a birth mother, have just this heart's cry of keeping families together. And we do have an open adoption. And so that is one thing that I'm passionate about, is that even when birth families can't be together, we respect each other and maintain that openness. So we did not go through an agency because we felt that that would limit our options. So we just started sending our information to everybody. We lived in Florida at the time, and we went online and we got everybody's email address, whether they were connected to an adoption agency or even foster care adoption, or really just anything that was even associated with potentially having the chance to introduce us to birth mothers. We really started seeking out some lawyers that had that adoption piece in their, profile or online on their website. If they say that they were a family lawyer and they processed adoptions, then I sent them an email. And that is what worked. We were put in touch with a lawyer through our home study provider, and it only took about 5 or 6 months for us to get matched with a birth mother, and she chose us for her daughter, who was born just 3 weeks after she said yes to our profile.
Did it cost money to adopt?
Yes, it did. Private infant adoption does cost, well, I won't say the most, because international adoption is typically more expensive. Plus, you have the travel fees on top of that, wherever, whatever country you're going to. Infant adoption in America is ridiculously expensive. And that was hard for us to understand. We understood the process of it, that yes, of course, there's going to be fees, there's going to be expenses. But it didn't seem to be ethical or moral for these adoptions to be so expensive. We just feel like there has to be a better way. And so one of Kevin and I's dreams, we would love to, at some point, if we ever have enough money, offer grants and scholarships to families that want to adopt, or he would love to work in the social work arena in any way to help these kids that are in the foster care system, and also families who are trying to adopt, and just bridging that gap between waiting children or children needing a home and waiting families who have love to give and are willing to go through the process. So yes, it was very expensive. God provided for us. Both of our adoptions were funded through the sale of our home. The housing market in Florida was not great for buyers, but Kevin looked up the value of our home and he sold our home, and we moved to a fixer upper, and then he fixed it up, and then we sold that one. And that is what funded our 2 adoptions.
So you different mothers for both babies?
We have the same birth mother. So we have an open relationship with Ashley. She's our daughter's birth mother. Yeah.
And she is still in Florida? Or did she move to
Yes.
Ohio with you? Yes.
She's in Florida, and we visit her every year. We go down. I think we've gone. Well, my oldest is 6, so yeah, we've had a visit with her every year, as long as she's able to see us. We definitely enjoy that time with her, and just have a great relationship with her. And her mother is also in Florida, and so we get to see them both at the same time, and that's always a treat.
So how is the difference between open adoption and closed adoption?
In the past, closed adoption was preferred because society just had this demand for everybody looking the same and matching, and people who adopted didn't want it to be broadcasted, and so they They did prioritize choosing children that looked like them so that they wouldn't have to explain or even tell their adopted child that they were adopted. So as you know, there's been many books and many stories come to light from those decades of these hidden adoptions, and women who give birth in a separate facility or a Catholic. I forget what they call them, like a home for unwed mothers, things like that. So um, research has shown, and it's become very obvious, that that secret identity crisis that these adoptees have when they grow up and realize that they were adopted, or somebody tells them, or they do the DNA testing. I think the DNA testing kind of made a big splash in that whole um, norm, the society norm of hiding adoptions. It all of a sudden was just like, no, this does not make sense, and it's not healthy, and it's not good. And as much as we can, we need to reform this system. So openness is tricky because you do have to take into account the safety of your child. And also what they can handle, what is age appropriate. So we have boundaries with our open adoption and our agreement with the birth mother. She has always been very respectful of the boundaries, and she knows that there's some things that we won't do or won't say until the girls are older. So you kind of have to, in our case, it takes a lot of prayer for wisdom to be able to handle these matters delicately. And I don't know that I always do a great job, to be honest, because I mean, I know the whole story. I know everything about their history, and um, it's hard for me to keep things from my children. But Kevin and I know that there will come a day where we will tell them um, the whole story. It's just not today. They are only 5 and 6 years old. So every family, as they're evaluating what is best for the child and what is best for the birth family and them as the adoptive parents, you have to take into account safety and also the age of your child and what they're able to comprehend and understand. But yes, openness is going to help fill those gaps of this identity, not even necessarily a crisis, but just the identity piece of these kids who, they want to know. And some of them don't, and that's okay. But I believe that it's always best to share as much as you can when they're willing and able to receive it, or interested in it. I have my daughters ask random questions at random times: bedtime, dinner time, in the car. And it will shock me because, they've never asked this question before about adoption or about their birth family, but here it is. And what am I going to say? And so we always just try to keep it positive, and we tell the truth as best as we can. We try not to hide things from them, but yeah, it's delicate. It's a tightrope to walk.
It has to be, because children at different ages understand things differently, right? So telling them something today at age 6, if you told them the same thing when they were 10, it could mean totally different to them. And I find children can absorb a lot, but they need such direction to they need explanations about what things are and how it goes,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're adopted, because they can come back and say to you, well, you're not my real mom, so I don't have to do what you tell me, right? And but there's a difference between being a birth mom and being their parent,
Yes.
and you're parenting them, and you're teaching them how to handle all this, so that when the time comes and they can spend time with their birth mom on their own when they're older, and make their own choices, that they're able to do that, and they're capable of making the right decisions that are best for themselves, because the child comes first no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
The child is always first, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, that's a big thing that Kevin and I just have to live in faith and live in hope that we're going to do the best that we can. And I want to be I want to be better for my kids. I'm hard on myself. But I know that I'm doing the best I can with what I've been given. And I know that I'm not alone and that I can always ask the Lord for wisdom, because I can't do this on my own. I'm very dependent on the Lord. I'm very dependent on my husband. We're a team, and it's going to be a long road. They're little, so we have a long way to go, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I do want to keep that healthy perspective of nothing has to be solved today, and their feelings today may change, but our our priority is to keep the conversation positive, um, to talk about their birth family in a positive light, to talk about adoption in a positive light, and then also just be aware and be responsive to how they are feeling and reacting to their stories, because they're they're giving clues. They're giving me clues of how it's affecting them. And I've already had plenty of conversations, especially with my oldest. And I can see the wheels turning in her brain. She is not dumb. She knows what's going on. She does not know everything, but I can see that it affects her little heart. So I have to be very tender to her little heart, and um, just pay attention to how this is making her feel, and not read too much into it and not go too deep with it, but just be aware that this is going to be a part of her life for the rest of her life. And so I want to set it up the best way I can. And again, it's a long journey. A conversation today may be totally different in 1 year, and she's only 6, so there's going to be a million conversations that we have, and Kevin and I are at peace with that.
Your open adoption, does that include you have contact with the birth mom, of course, by going to visit her every year, but what about in between those visits? Is she allowed to call you and check up with you? Does she send birthday cards to the kids or Christmas cards, or how does that work in the
We
between your
communicate
visits?
mostly, yeah, just messaging back and forth. She loves pictures, so she would take pictures every day if I could send them every day. I don't, but I would say probably about once a month I send her a batch of photos, and I probably call her maybe 2 or 3 times a year, besides the time that we meet her in person. Sometimes things happen, or um, I it's on my heart often. Like, when should I talk to her? And we don't talk a lot, really, but every time we do, it's wonderful. I think last year we talked around like Thanksgiving or Christmas time, and we managed to get all four of us on my phone. I had the babies on my lap, and Kevin came and stood behind us, and then Ashley was on the phone, and it's a beautiful thing. I think having that a little bit like casual conversation, and just like showing her around the house, or just having the girls tell her what they did that day, like what craft they're working on. That's just, it's just short and sweet, and it just keeps the relationship fun and positive. And so, yeah, that it doesn't happen frequently, but it does happen.
Do your girls call you mom and dad?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're
Yeah,
stuck with us.
I wouldn't say they're stuck with you, but all right. So you adopted in Florida, but then you moved and you started doing foster care. How did that come about? And how did that affect your family life with your babies?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, it was my husband's idea. He wanted to, like I said, he's not a social worker, but he has this desire to be involved in child welfare. And so he wanted to kind of find a job that would be something that he could do without going back to school for social work. So he thought, okay, well, I know that there's group homes out there that are looking for foster families, and they'll pay for your home to live there, and you help take care of children. And I told him he was crazy, and it was just a big old thing of just, what are you saying? You're saying it's better for us to go drag our toddlers to another state and take care of a bunch of other kids. That just, it didn't sound fun for me. um, but I was wrong. It was actually the most fun. It was so fun. We moved to South Carolina first. That was the first group home that we were involved in, and we lived on campus. And then when we were off duty, we lived off campus. And so we rotated with another set of house parents, and we lived in this huge cottage of for teenage girls. And we had 4, 5, 6, 7 teenage girls at a time. And then when we were off duty, we would go live in our off duty house. So it's kind of an interesting arrangement. And it was exhausting. It was beyond exhausting. But these kids are in the foster care system through nothing that they have done, but just the choices that adults in their lives have made. And we got to be their foster parents for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. And we did that for a full year. I got to know so many beautiful young teenagers that just changed my life. We had so much fun together. We had some really, really difficult days. We learned a lot about trauma and about just how to interact with teens who have been through just the absolute hardest, worst things that any kid, no kid should have to go through any of this, but they have. And so a lot of grief, a lot of joy, a lot of fun, super busy, super tiring. And our daughters were along for the ride. So I potty trained toddlers while fostering teenage girls. It was exhausting, but Kevin and I did it together. And that was probably the best part about it, was working alongside my husband for that year. And then at the end of that year, they asked us to move and do the boys, and we said no. And so we transferred to another group home and worked with teen girls for another year. And that was in North Carolina. So we got to live in the mountains, and that was beautiful. And basically just, do the same things that we had done in South Carolina, live with teenage girls, raise our daughters. My daughter started kindergarten in North Carolina, and my other daughter did preschool. And yeah, it's busy. I had to cook for a whole bunch of people, and nobody all liked the same meal every time. You would have someone who would complain, and then the next person would love it, and then the next person would say I didn't season it enough, and then the other person would say, well, you seasoned it too much. And it was just, can't make everybody happy. But we ended up leaving fostering just about 6 months ago, and now we're in Ohio, and my girls are going to be both in school in the fall, and we're in a slower pace of life. But God used those 2 years of fostering just to absolutely blow my world wide open. And I cannot believe how much I learned and grew, and in just 2 years. It's unbelievable.
Were there common threads through these teenage girls, for the traumas or things, the way they acted? And would you say there was a commonality between them?
A lot of them had been in foster care most of their life. Some of them had siblings. Actually, a lot of them had siblings. Some of them even had siblings on campus where they could see their siblings. Some of them had visits with their birth families. Most of them did not. Yeah, the trauma piece is probably what I learned the most about. ADHD, neurodivergence, and just sensory processing disorder, things that our nervous system has a hard time with when your brain is like shut down because of trauma. So because these kids have been through so much, they have lived in survival mode. And so because their brain is kind of, I'm not a neurological genius, so don't quote me on anything I say about the brain. But
That's okay.
they struggle. They struggle with school. A lot of them struggle with school. A lot of them struggle with relationships and just knowing like what is healthy and what is unhealthy. Because when you grow up and you have patterns and people living that out a certain way, that is what you think is normal. And there were a lot of adults in their lives that had unhealthy relationships, or unhealthy conflict resolution, and marriages or dating relationships that just showed these kids, oh, this is how we handle it. And the kids didn't really have anything else to compare it to. So as they're teenagers, um, it's hard to kind of turn back the clock and reteach them all of the things about relationships, about even their relationship with food. They if their birth parents weren't in a good place and able to have a steady job, they may not have been able to learn about healthy nutrition and bring home a balanced diet, or be able to be home to cook a balanced diet for these kids. And so they're used to food that's just a quick fix, like a bag of Cheetos. And sometimes that's just all they get for lunch or dinner or whatever they can find. And so they're not really used to a balanced meal. And so that's probably why they complained about my food a lot, because I had a lot of variety, but I it was balanced. I had the meat and the potatoes and the vegetables and a salad and water to drink or milk, and they were always asking for sugary stuff or something that their bodies were used to. So it's not that that's what they wanted just because, oh, it's sugar, I only want sugar. It's that they're not used to the meat and the potatoes and the vegetables and the salad. And so it's like you're teaching their palate a whole new world of food that they're just not used to.
Yeah, I've had somebody else say that food was one of the threads that went through everybody. When you served them food, they wanted more. Nobody ever wanted less. They always wanted to go for seconds because they didn't know didn't think where the next meal was coming from, and if they would ever eat again, right? So, and she said that their brain didn't send the notification that their stomachs were full.
Hmm.
So when
Yeah.
they were going through the trauma, their brains did not work and did not send the messages to their stomach that, hey, you're full. So they wanted more and more and more. So that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all connected. And, like I said, I'm not your brain science girl, but I did learn a lot about trauma in the brain. And I think everybody should, go through some sort of crash course on trauma, because it does help explain some behaviors, and it kind of takes the blame off of the kid, because we're so quick to just judge, um oh, they're acting badly because they want to. And it's like, no, they really don't want to. They just either don't know any different, or this is what their nervous system is telling them right now. I mean, there's a lot of behaviors that can be learned and unlearned, but Kevin and I, as parents of our own two children, we've had so many conversations based off of what we have learned in these last 2 years of fostering, because really, really smart people are teaching us how our bodies are wired, and it's making sense. And it just gives you that perspective that if you don't have any sort of training on trauma at all, which I didn't before we started fostering, then you just don't know, and you don't know what you don't know.
That is so true. How did you start writing books?
Oh, that's a great question. When I was in my early 20s, I was working as a retirement counselor for the schools in the area in Florida. And I would go in and talk to the teachers about helping plan their retirement. And I was really good at that job because I love talking to people. And I loved helping them save money for their retirement. But I didn't make very much money, so eventually I had to transition out of that job because I was having fun being social, but I wasn't able to make enough money for it to be a stable job. I needed to get a more stable job to earn a steady income. But while I was doing that job, I had a lot of time, and I just started writing down all of my childhood memories. And I wanted to write about growing up with six brothers and two loving parents. And I wanted to kind of work through my desire to, have something to prove. I always felt like I had something to prove with six brothers. And so I wrote stories through the lens of what was I always striving for? What was I always trying to achieve as the only girl? And just trying to process and make sense of what my childhood was. I think every young adult goes through this dilemma of, oh, my parents were humans and imperfect and also wonderful or not wonderful, depending on your experience. And so it was a really healing process for me. And I wanted to write a book because I wanted to collect everything. I had been writing, my whole life in journals and everything like that. But I really wanted to collect my childhood and just put it in a box. And then I could move on to something else. And so I'm so glad I did that because that was the book of my heart. It was my childhood memoir of what it was like having six brothers and two amazing parents who loved us with everything that they could. But also, it was kind of crazy. It was kind of chaotic. And I think everybody's surprised when I tell them I have six brothers. And so I just wanted to
Yeah,
compile the
I'm just in shock
stories.
right now.
I wanted to I wanted to just write stuff down, and I wanted to tell the world what it was like to grow up in that environment. And I'm reading that book aloud to my kids right now. My 6-year old is just loving it. She's like, read another chapter. And I'm like, you have to wait till tomorrow. Tomorrow is the next chapter. And I'm like, oh, this is so exciting. This is the most captivating audience I've ever had. It's my 6-year old. But she loves it. She loves hearing the stories about her grandpa and her uncles and me. And her dad hasn't entered the picture yet. He's not till like the final chapter. But that was my first book. That was the book of just like what was on my heart for several years. And I was just writing down everything by hand and then putting it all in a book and compiling the chapters. And it also was hard to put everything together. I really struggled with just book structure. How do you make this work? Like, how do I organize everything and make it interesting and readable? So after that, I was addicted. I just loved putting my stories into book form. And so as soon as I was wrapping up that project, even before I was done with that project, I was already writing my next book about being the next phase of my life. So A Cub Among Bears is my childhood memoir. And I think I ended the story right when I got married. So 21 years old, 21 years old. And then we moved off to Texas for Kevin to go to school. And so that started a whole new phase of all these rich, beautiful stories about what God taught me in those years. And then as I started writing that, we were going through our infertility journey. And so I was writing a lot about infertility online and blogging, just essays every month, whatever I wanted to write about. I had to get it out of my body. It just needed an exit. And a lot of people enjoyed reading those short little essays about experiences I've had or journeys I had been on. We, went out to the Grand Canyon and I wrote about that. I wrote about how Kevin and I met in detail, and that was a very long story because I wanted it in writing. I wanted it to be part of my history so that, I capture all those details and put it somewhere. I need to find that, by the way. I mean, it's stored somewhere, but I don't have that blog really anymore. So I need to make sure that I capture that um, as well for my kids one day, because everybody loves a good love story. So I couldn't stop, and I've never stopped. I spent 11 years and I've been writing. I started out writing once a month. And so it's been 11 years that I've been writing at least once a month online and creating books.
What does the title Nothing Wasted mean to you?
I thought about those years in seminary, and I thought about some of the pain that we had gone through, especially infertility. Um, we didn't necessarily go through infertility while we were in seminary, but it kind of led to it because I had such a desire to have children. And then, really, in seminary, I just had to work. And that sounds so, that sounds so, entitled, like, oh, I had to work. I didn't want to have a normal job. I wanted to raise kids. I wanted to be involved in ministry. I didn't want to have a career. And yet Kevin was in school, and so I was in the financial industry. And then when we moved and I wasn't able to get pregnant, I was still in the financial industry, and there was just something that bothered me, um, over and over. I didn't like being in a career. I didn't like working, and I got a lot of anxiety, and infertility kind of threw my body out of whack. And so I struggled with a full-time job. Really, really struggled, mainly physically. I had a lot of physical issues, and I was sick a lot, and I couldn't get things right. I remember calling my mom and just keep saying, I can't wait until I can call my mom and tell her that everything's fine. Everything is all better. And I just kept thinking, I don't like this job, or I'm still feeling sick, or we still can't get pregnant, and I can't afford this test. And so we have to wait. It's like there was always just so many problems going on, and nothing was ever resolved. And I just felt guilty for always being the one to call and still be struggling. So I wanted to focus on what God taught me and not focus on all of the circumstances. So the subtitle, Struggling Well Through Difficult Seasons, I knew I couldn't take away the fact that I was struggling, but I wanted to learn how to shift my perspective and struggle well. Learn more dependence on the Lord. Like, what is He teaching me? What are these seasons about? Yes, I'm having high anxiety. Yes, we're not able to get pregnant. Um, but what am I learning in my relationships with others? How is this helping me serve others? How is it teaching me to have empathy? And a lot of those lessons didn't come, honestly, until I was out of the season of, the difficult season. Then I could reflect back and really see, oh, wow, this is how God has used it. Like the empathy, for example. I think the years of infertility has made me infinitely more empathetic towards people who are struggling and aren't able to have children. I would not probably have had that if I hadn't gone through it. So nothing wasted is just this phrase that stuck with me. Someone at a writers conference came up with the phrase unwasted for my book title, and I really liked that. And so that was the stand-in title for a while, unwasted. Um, but then I switched it to nothing wasted, based off of verse in the New Testament where Jesus does the miracle and there's all these baskets of food and nothing is wasted. And how beautiful is that? That the gifts that He gives us, like sometimes those difficult seasons nearly kill us and we are struggling. And there's so many days that I was just crying in the shower, just desperate for my situation to improve. But nothing is wasted. All of those tears, like God catches our tears in a bottle. He taught me so much about what it is to be in relationship with Him. And yeah, it's hard. We go through really, really hard seasons, but nothing is wasted. All of the hard seasons are forming us and getting rid of our selfishness and our pride and humbling us. And we really need to be humbled. I needed to be humbled. I still need to be humbled. And so I thank God that He took those really difficult situations and used them to refine me, to strengthen our marriage, and just to teach me to be more dependent on Him.
You have said that you enjoy reading and that you read a lot of memoirs. You read about 100 books a year. And
Guilty.
you like to read a lot of memoirs. So, what books have you read that you think we might be interested in hearing?
Well, as far as memoir, there's several that come to my mind right away that are just always on the top of my list. And I just will never get over how impactful they have been. The first one I would say is Open by Andre Agassi, the tennis player. He he shares everything in that book, and the way he shares it is just incredibly vulnerable. He lays it all out. He holds nothing back, and it is one of the most compelling books I've ever read. He writes it with a co-writer. And so that co-writer also wrote The Tender Bar, which is not as good as Open, but Andre's story is just it's just unbelievable. And it's heartbreaking. And I really enjoyed reading that. I think I read it twice, actually, or at least 1.5 times, because you just start flipping those pages and you're just sucked right back in. The narrative, the flow of the book, the way they lay it out, there's no quotation marks. So the dialogue is just really choppy, like back and forth. And so it's really compelling to read. The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls is also a very hard read. She grew up in poverty and with very eccentric parents. But her writing is unbelievable. And that is probably one of the best memoirs ever written. I think a lot of people would say that. And they made a movie based off of it. It's a wonderful movie. The other memoir that comes to mind is Wild by Cheryl Strayed. She lost her mother and went through a very dark time in her 20s, and then chose to hike the Pacific Crest Trail by herself. And that is also a hard read. I love these memoirs that are just like really tough, gritty situations, but when you're rooting for that main character, and you know that it's their real life and it's their real struggles and these things really happened, it's amazing what they can do on the page. That also was made into a movie with Reese Witherspoon. Very good movie. So memoir is definitely my favorite genre because, like I said, it's the real story. Lots of books are fun to read. I mean, they're just um, a really enjoyable experience, but there's definitely books that have changed my life.
And now you have slowed down by moving to Ohio.
Yes, I have. I have slowed down.
And how do your girls enjoy where they are now?
They love it. They're so resilient. They just bounce back. You know, we've dragged them all over the country. They've moved every year basically of their life, and they're good. I do have one that struggles more with transition, so we're trying to help her. Mondays seem to be her awful day of the week right now. There's something about the weekend, and then Monday just hits her and it messes up her nervous system, and she just cannot handle Mondays right now. So it's been the last 3 or 4 Mondays in a row ever since school got out. And Kevin and I both sat down with her, and he asked her on his own, like, is it because I go to work and you're at home? And she's like, no. And then I asked her later, is it because, are you sad you missed daddy because he went to work today? No. So we're like, we can't figure it out. But they love the pool here. They've been swimming, they've been little fish. And, you know, life is really chaotic with two littles who are high energy and very loud. They don't sit in color for an hour. And one of them won't even sit and watch TV. She will kind of, but she has to still be moving. Or she'll complain, I don't like this. I don't like this. And I'm like, I think you might if you just sit down and watch it. So, yeah, they're wild and they make my life super fun and crazy. And this is all payback for all of my hyperactivity to my parents growing up. So it is what it is.
I know we do hope for that payback. I know my daughter gave me a very difficult time when she was growing up, and she's had two sons, so it's not quite the same. Um, but I always hoped that she would have a daughter and that it would be payback for her. But yeah, I think we always hope that they'll learn their lessons, right?
Yeah.
What message do you hope readers are going to take away from your books?
My theme right now is dependence on God. I just think that that's the biggest thing I've learned in the last several years, and that's what I'm writing about now. I'm trying to compile my third book, and um, I'm rewriting a lot of it, and that seems to be the theme that just keeps popping up is how fostering teenage girls has just driven me closer to depending on God for everything and letting go of control. There's so much that we want to control as parents, and we feel like we can, and we feel like we know what's best, and we can boss people around. And yeah, we do parent, we do teach our children, but I have got to let go of the steering wheel more often and say, you know what? It's okay if they don't want to do exactly the thing the way that I would do it. I need to let go. I need to let go of my expectations because it really doesn't matter. They're their own person. Um, so I'm digging into that theme, and I think that life is better when we let go of what people think of us, let go of high expectations in our marriage. Kevin and I grew closer during fostering because we realized we were on the same team. And um, there were arguments and disagreements of the way we did things, and we didn't always agree. But I mean, he had my back every single day, and I haven't struggled with anxiety for several years now because he and I worked together, and I always had him. And just having that security, it was just such a beautiful gift and example of who the Lord is to us. Um, and then I don't have to worry. Our car broke down last month, and I almost didn't even care. I'll be honest. It didn't affect me like it might have in the past. And I think that's because God has been training my heart to say, like, I'll take care of you. Yeah, it's not going to be fun having one car for a couple of weeks, but you can do it. You can drop your husband off at work and pick him up. It's okay. Um, Sometimes when you go through really, really, really hard things, God uses those to teach you. And then when you're in the moments that um, may have been really hard for you 5 or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it doesn't feel as weighty anymore because I think I have more trust in the Lord because I've seen him protect our family. I've seen him show up and give me wisdom in the exact moment that I needed it, give me words to say, kept me calm in moments of crisis when someone's calling 911 and the Lord comes. I mean, that Holy Spirit really does come over you and allows you to walk through that experience as the adult, as the parent, as the one in charge, and sustains you. So I'm very grateful for what he has taught me. And I do want to package those stories and put them together in a way that women can read and just learn and see like how confident they can be in the Lord's presence in their life and how they can trust him and depend on him for everything because he will provide.
What would you say today to someone who's considering foster care or adoption?
Oh, it's a wild ride. Buckle up. There's so many ways you can be involved. I really like respite care. That is where you essentially babysit kids in the foster care system while their foster parents can get a little break. And then you only have the kids for like a weekend or a week. That is really helpful. The DCF or DSS or whatever it's called in your state, they really need good families to help with respite care. And also, you could be an emergency placement because there's so many kids that need homes. They need a bed. They are sleeping in DSS offices, and it's just not okay. So I think it's a really beautiful thing if you are willing and able and you have the rooms in your house to take on a kiddo once in a while. Um, Teenagers are not as scary as you think. They actually are really wonderful. They're so much fun. I think that every kid in the foster care system really needs one on one attention. Working in a group home was tough because some of our teens really needed more one on one attention. And because you're in a group home, they weren't able to get that. So, adoption is a huge commitment. It's beautiful, and it's the way that God brought me my family. But it also comes with a lot of complexities. And it's hard to be informed on all the things before you jump in. But there's so many books. On my website right now is a summer reading guide for foster and adoptive families. And there's just lots of great books on there that will just give you an idea of what it's like to jump into foster care and adoption. I'm a reader, so that's how I get my information and that's how I learn. I understand not everybody is that way. There's also so many podcasts, but learning about trauma based behavior, TBRI, and the connected child, and anything by Karen Purvis is really amazing and can just teach you how to interact with challenging behavior. I it'll take 5 lifetimes to learn everything. So I wish that I could implement everything that I've learned. But that's where the depending on God part comes in. Is even if you know the things, you still have to in the moment, think of what the child is going through, and that is very challenging. So it's all very challenging, but the kids need families.
What would you say to someone who's listening today that's walking through a difficult season and is wondering if things will ever get better?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know how that feels. Um, Grief and lament are an important part of my faith. The Psalms are just absolutely beautiful, full of grief and lament. And we're human, we're going to struggle. So, those Psalms can be your prayers when you don't even know what to pray. David, he did not mess around. He said exactly what he wanted to God and he got away with it. And it's in history forever. So those Psalms are just a beautiful way to express your pain. I just finished talking about the shack with a podcast guest, and that whole book is about the problem of suffering and the problem of pain. And there's a great movie based on that book as well. Um, so one thing I got from that story, and it's a fiction story, but it's about a dad who loses his daughter. Uh, I think that speaks loudest in that story is that God is there with you in your pain. Humans are never going to understand or comprehend why God doesn't act the way that they want him to act. But God is with us in our pain. And he allowed his son to come to earth and die. He lost his son, and not forever, but he made that sacrifice for us. So There's another book by Dane Ortland, Gentle and Lowly. He talks about how compassionate the Lord is and how we often just think the worst about things. But the Lord is just so gracious and so kind and so compassionate. I have really been turning to worship music that has a lot of scripture kind of infused in the words, because sometimes you don't know what to pray and you're sad or you're mad, or um, you don't want to do the normal faith habits that you've been used to your whole life. I find that music and um, soothing worship music, not the stuff that's on the radio or even the stuff I sing in church, but just kind of more indie music that you don't hear every day, that's really going to allow you to hear the words and think about the words for what they are. And scripture, there's a lot. Ellie Holcomb sings songs that have scripture in it. Shane and Shane has a worship album that uses the Psalms, puts the Psalms to music, and it is gorgeous. So turning to the Lord in your pain, if you can't move forward, if you can't go any further, just accept grief and lament as your holy work right now, and turn to the Lord in your pain, because he's there.
Thank you so much, Kim. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And as we wrap up today's conversation, I hope you've been reminded that every adoption story is also a story of perseverance. Kim's journey through the infertility, through foster care, adoption, and the everyday joys and challenges of motherhood reminds us that life doesn't always unfold according to our plans. But that doesn't mean that these chapters are without purpose. Whether you're a birth parent, an adoptee, an adoptive parent, a foster parent, or someone simply walking through a difficult season of your own, I hope today's conversation has encouraged you to keep moving forward one step at a time. As Kim so beautifully reminds us, our struggles are not wasted. They can shape us, they can strengthen us, and even become the very thing that allows us to encourage someone else. Kim, thank you for sharing your heart so openly and for reminding us that hope can grow even in life's hardest seasons.
Yes, thank you for having me, Janet.
And thank you to everyone listening. If this episode has encouraged you, please subscribe, have a review, and share it with someone who may need to hear this message. I'm Janet Monroe, and this has been Roots and Branches Adoption Stories on KFred Radio. You can reach us at, you can connect with us at rootsandbranchescontact@gmail.com or call 615-870-6433 to comment or tell your story. Until next time, remember that every story has roots, every life grows branches, and every voice deserves to be heard.